July 3, 1976. Inside Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, inmate sits on his cot scribbling on a yellow legal pad. He's serving 25 years for espionage, the worst breach in CIA history, selling 14 deep-cover agents to the Soviets and collapsing an entire intelligence network. Locked in a 6x9 cell, no phone, no visitors, mail screened by 3 agencies, the CIA designed his confinement to ensure he never communicated again. But right now, he's running an operation. Using letters, library books, and one unwitting guard, he's feeding disinformation to Langley that will misdirect CIA counterintelligence for 4 years. Every false lead, every wasted resource, all traced to a man with nothing. The agency spent $2 million trying to understand how their prisoner was manipulating them. Behavioral analysts, cryptographers, congressional oversight, no one could explain it. By the time they understood, the damage was catastrophic. 3 operations burned, 2 governments compromised, and a decade-long mole hunt. How did a prisoner with nothing outsmart the most powerful spy agency on Earth? And what did the CIA discover when they finally cracked his method? Edwin Paul Wilson was born in May 3, 1928, in Nampa, Idaho. He comes from a poor farm family, with newspaper route and odd jobs. The kind of childhood that teaches a kid to watch adults and wait them out. He ships out as a merchant seaman, working the kind of vessels where you learn to solve problems with whatever is bolted to the deck. Earned a psychology degree from the University of Portland in 1953, joins the Marines, serves in Korea after the war's peak has cooled, but before the world feels stable, a small hinge swings a huge door. Flying home, he falls into conversation with a stranger who suggests he might be suited for a certain kind of work. Wilson writes down a number. In 1955, the day after his discharge, he joins the CIA. His talent is not movie star charm. Logistics is the unsexy backbone of intelligence work. While others chase glamorous tradecraft, Wilson masters the mundane machinery that makes espionage possible. Paper trails, shipping routes. Front companies are real businesses with a second hidden purpose. They file taxes. They hire employees. They own trucks and ships and office furniture. They look boring on purpose. Behind the invoices, they move information and equipment without fingerprints. Wilson is good at making fake look real because he first makes real look unremarkable. In agency language, that skill is called cover. In plain English, it is a mask that survives scrutiny, not just a quick glance, but audits, background checks, hostile surveillance. The kind of mask you can live inside for years without it cracking. He becomes what the CIA needs most, a man who can operate in the overlap between legal and deniable. The gray zone where official policy ends and operational necessity begins, and where one misstep could be catastrophic, where paperwork tells one story and phone calls tell another, weaving a network of unseen consequences. The place where you cannot tell where the law ends and the mission begins, a realm that only a few ever truly understand. In early 1971, officially, he left the CIA. Immediately, quietly, he begins working for naval intelligence on a classified unit called Task Force 157. Different letterhead, same shadows. Wilson runs companies. He runs contacts. He runs deniable operations. The CIA maintains personal and professional ties with him after his departure. The lines blur until there are no lines. Just people who know each other and call when they need something moved, sourced, or made to disappear. By the mid-1970s, the gray zone was in full color. He assembles an empire, more than 100 corporations across the United States and Europe, an apartment in Geneva, a hunting lodge in England, a townhouse in Washington, D.C., real estate in North Carolina, Lebanon, Mexico, a seaside villa in Tripoli, 3 private planes, a net worth later estimated at around $23 million. He brags he knows Concorde flight attendants by name. On paper, he is a businessman with frequent flyer miles. In practice, he is a bridge, a human connecting rod between what Washington wants and what Washington cannot admit it wants. Bridges attract traffic, and traffic leaves tracks. Every friend who visits that Virginia farm is a potential witness. Every handshake is a future subpoena. Every half-joking story told over scotch is a line someone will quote back at him in court. The danger hides inside the legend. The bigger his profile grows, the harder it becomes for the agency to pretend he never existed. His guest list reads like a roll call of classified influence. Congressmen, generals, CIA leadership. One name surfaces again and again: Theodore Ted Shackley, a senior covert operations figure nicknamed the Blonde Ghost, and by multiple accounts, a familiar presence in Wilson's orbit. Then comes the assignment, at least, Wilson's version of it. He later claims Shackley asks him to go to Libya, not to sell weapons, to watch, to monitor Carlos the Jackal, the Venezuelan terrorist living under Libyan protection. So he goes Tripoli in late 1970s. Oil money, weapons shopping, and a regime the United States hates, but also needs to understand. Wilson arrives as a businessman on paper, and, according to his own defense, an intelligence source in practice. He thinks the institution that built his mask will protect him. He is wrong, because the moment his work becomes inconvenient, the same people who loved the gray zone will pretend it never existed. And what does a man do when his entire identity is deniable? How do you prove a relationship that was designed from the first handshake to be unprovable? Former associates start talking to investigators, the kind of talking that turns a secretive operator into a headline. Kevin Mulcahy, a former partner, becomes a key source describing Wilson's Libyan dealings. At first, Mulcahy believes they're working under U.S. intelligence protection. The operations feel sanctioned, coordinated, official. Then something shifts. The work stops feeling like cover and starts feeling like crime. Mulcahy has his own arc. At first, he believes Wilson operates under a U.S. intelligence umbrella. Wilson even mentions Libya plans in Shackley's presence while Mulcahy is in the room, according to declassified accounts. Then the work stops feeling like cover and starts feeling like private business. Mulcahy goes to the authorities. In Washington, prosecutors build a case. In the press, Wilson becomes a character: rogue spy, death merchant, renegade. The CIA's public posture is swift and total. We don't know him. He left in 1971. Anything after that is his problem. If you have ever watched a corporation delete a colleague from the group chat, you understand the mechanics, the sudden silence, the coordinated story, the way everyone who once knew you suddenly can't remember your name. Now scale it to an intelligence agency, and the deletion comes with handcuffs. Now scale it to an intelligence agency, and the deletion comes with handcuffs. Wilson is indicted. But he is in Libya, and Libya does not extradite. So he stays sheltered by a regime that could also kill him, abandoned by the very government that once fed him classified briefings, leaving him in a limbo of danger and uncertainty. A special kind of claustrophobia, where the sky is wide and the exits are zero. Then the Justice Department finds the pressure point. Wilson wants out. Enter Ernest Kaiser, old contact. Reporters describe him as a man with shadowy CIA connections. Kaiser offers a deal, flies to the Dominican Republic, and a National Security Council arrangement will make the legal problems disappear. It is a sting. Wilson boards a plane to the Caribbean. He landed in Santo Domingo on June 15, 1982, expecting freedom. Dominican officials refuse him entry. U.S. Marshals are waiting on the tarmac. The trap closes like a steel door. The man who spent years building escape routes for other people walks straight into one built for him. Back in the United States, a judge sets bail at $20 million, a figure called unprecedented at the time. That number is not bail. It is a message. He is not going anywhere. If you're finding this story as unbelievable as I did when I first researched it, hit the like button so more people can hear it, and subscribe if you want stories like this one every week. Then the trials pile up. Washington, D.C., soliciting the murder of a Libyan dissident. Acquitted. Virginia, illegal exports of firearms, including one later tied to an assassination in Bonn. Convicted. 15 years later, reduced. New York, murder for hire conspiracy. 2 prosecutors, witnesses, even his own wife on the alleged target list. Convicted. 25 years, and Houston, the case that will decide his identity. The charge: exporting approximately 20 tons of C4 plastic explosive to Libya in 1977. Wilson's defense is the same as always. CIA cover. The prosecution cannot stop Wilson from telling his story, so it tries to stop the jury from believing it. And lurking in the background is a strange technical law, the Classified Information Procedures Act, CIPA, the rulebook designed to prevent defendants from forcing the government to reveal secrets in open court. The government calls it protection. Defendants call it shackles. Either way, it keeps the most dangerous evidence off the table. So the government reaches for authority instead. The Briggs Affidavit. The paper knife. It says, in essence, there is no CIA relationship after 1971. Read it. Believe it. Convict. The jury reads it a second time, then convicts. Exactly the moment from the opening. By early 1984, the sentences merged into one number, 52 years. Wilson is sent to Marion, Illinois. Solitary confinement. 23 hours a day. A man who once hosted power now counts ceiling tiles, and here is the contradiction that keeps him breathing. If the CIA truly had no meaningful contact with Wilson after 1971, why is the government so desperate to keep its own files about him sealed? What exactly is in those vaults that costs more to reveal than to bury a man alive? Marion is not just a prison, it is a machine for shrinking people. Built to house the most dangerous federal inmates in America, it operates on a simple philosophy: complete isolation provides complete control. The architecture itself is a weapon designed to eliminate every variable that makes a human feel human. After the facility's permanent lockdown begins, inmates spend 23 hours a day in their cells. Steel door, concrete slab, a slot for food. Human contact is reduced to transactions. Wilson later says he endures 10 years of it. 10 years where the day's highlight is the sound of keys and the brief, humiliating ritual of being counted. While he sits, the outside world erases him. His wife divorces him, citing the impossibility of loving a ghost. His sons sever contact, whether from shame, survival instinct, or simple exhaustion. The result is the same. The IRS seizes his properties, auctioning off the physical evidence of his former life piece by piece. The bitter arithmetic, the same government that insists he was not working for them, also confiscates everything he built while allegedly not working for them. Wilson has no leverage left, no money, no influence, no dinners with congressmen, not even the luxury of being believed. Every claim he makes sounds like the desperate fiction of a convicted spy trying to rewrite his own history. So he reaches for the only weapon the system permits: paper. He gets a typewriter. The keys are stiff. Every struck letter sounds like friction against the wall. He starts filing Freedom of Information Act requests. FOIA, the law that lets ordinary citizens ask the government for its own records. In theory, it's democracy's flashlight, shining into the dark corners of bureaucracy. In practice, it's a flashlight with dying batteries, wrapped in regulations, handed through a slot by someone who doesn't want you to see. FOIA, the law that lets ordinary citizens ask the government for its own records. In theory, a citizen's flashlight. In practice, a flashlight with dying batteries, wrapped in regulations, handed through a slot. Wilson learns the mechanics the hard way. Requests must be surgically specific. Appeals must be timely. Denials arrive coded in bureaucratic dialect he teaches himself to translate. Exemption means trust us. Redaction means you are not seeing this. National security means go away. Prison does something to a man with an ego. It forces him to become meticulous. He builds his case one document at a time, a prisoner digging a tunnel with a teaspoon. Slow, grinding, relentless. He files, denied, redacted, delayed, national security, no responsive documents. Years pass. The Reagan administration ends. The Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union dissolves the enemy Wilson allegedly betrayed and no longer exists. The geopolitical landscape that justified his imprisonment has completely transformed. Wilson types through all of it, measuring time not in historical epochs, but in pages filed, denials received, appeals pending. Wilson types through all of it. He sues. Sometimes he wins. Fragments leak out. A memo here, a date there. Enough to keep the chase alive because he is not chasing a theory. He is chasing a specific lie, the Briggs Affidavit, 3.5 pages that sentenced him to die. Judge Lynn Hughes later describes the government's behavior as a shell game with walnut shells moving constantly, hoping the P will not be found. The metaphor reads as comedy in a courtroom opinion until you remember the P is a human life. Then, after more than a decade of pushing, a crack appears. A Justice Department memorandum titled Duty to Disclose Possibly False Testimony. It is not written for Wilson. It is written for the people deciding whether to tell the truth. The memo describes the Briggs Affidavit as inaccurate, not maybe, not arguably, inaccurate. Someone scribbles a note in the margin. The plain meaning of services makes the affidavit inaccurate. 3 days after Wilson was convicted, the government privately acknowledged the evidence that convicted him was wrong, and still told no one, not him, not the judge, not the jury. This is where most people stop. A prisoner with a memo is still a prisoner. Wilson does not stop. He uses the memo as a crowbar. He files motions to vacate. He forces courts to look again. He keeps writing because writing is the only way to move inside a cage, and a federal judge in Houston, Lynn Hughes, does something small that changes everything. He does not free Wilson, but he appoints counsel. He creates a doorway into the classified world Wilson cannot reach alone, because the truth Wilson needs is not in his cell. It is locked in a government vault. So, how much damage can a court-appointed lawyer with a security clearance do to a 20-year-old lie? David Adler enters the story. A Houston attorney and, by multiple accounts, a former CIA officer. He carries the one thing Wilson has been denied for 2 decades: security clearance to read classified files. It's the ultimate irony that Wilson spent his career building those files, and now he needs someone else's permission to prove they exist. A Houston attorney and, by multiple accounts, a former CIA officer. He carries the one thing Wilson has been denied for 2 decades: clearance to read classified files. When Adler reveals his CIA background, Wilson explodes. He trusts no one with the agency's fingerprints on them. Not after what happened. Not after watching the same institution that trained him, deployed him, and profited from him systematically erase every trace of their relationship. But Adler does not argue. He waits. In prison, patience is the only currency that is appreciated. Then the court orders access. Adler sits in a Justice Department vault, a windowless room stacked with manila folders and classification stamps, filled to the ceiling with decades of intelligence bureaucracy. He reads thousands of pages about Edwin Wilson, notes meticulously each reference, cross-checks names, dates, and operations. The paperwork tells a story the jury never heard, revealing a shadow world of contacts, requests, and missions that had been hidden behind layers of secrecy, redactions, and procedural hurdles, a labyrinth of proof waiting for recognition. After 1971, after the agency swore it cut him loose, Wilson maintained at least 80 documented professional contacts with the CIA or other U.S. intelligence channels. Shackley asks him to acquire a Soviet missile. Someone requests help finding housing for a Laotian general who once served the agency. Someone else asks for anti-tank weapons for a sensitive operation. Discussions surface about using him for desalination projects in Egypt. Whether Wilson is honorable or monstrous, that list carries one devastating implication. The Briggs Affidavit cannot be a good faith mistake. It is a narrative decision, and it gets worse. Before the Houston trial, internal CIA material acknowledges continuing personal and professional relations with Wilson after his resignation, and identifies incidents that could support a defense that he conducted post-resignation activities for the agency. The document warns its own list is not exhaustive. The CIA knew before trial, and prosecutors had access at minimum to discussions and documents contradicting the zero contact story. The jury deadlocks. They ask for the affidavit. The judge reads it. The holdout flips. Guilty. That paper functions as a weapon not because it is persuasive, but because it is authoritative. A bunker in Virginia contradicts a man in chains, and 12 citizens believe the bunker. Then comes the cover-up that turns a procedural failure into a scandal. The affidavit was drafted in Houston in early February 1983. The jury convicts on February 5th. Within days, CIA personnel question its accuracy. Justice Department lawyers circulate the duty to disclose memo. The government talks about correcting the record and chooses silence, not after trial, not before sentencing, not on appeal, not for years. The argument, when officials are finally cornered, is almost comic in its audacity. Yes, the affidavit is inaccurate, but it was not intentionally false. And even if it was false, it is irrelevant unless Wilson can prove the CIA specifically authorized the explosive shipment. That is the no-win cage. Proving the lie does not automatically free him. It only proves he was convicted inside a rigged frame. Adler files the motion anyway. A direct accusation. The guilty verdict was obtained through knowing use of false evidence and suppression of favorable evidence. The fight collapses onto one desk, one judge, one decision. And the system still holds all its defenses. Delay, classification, national security, the slow violence of time. After 20 years, can one prisoner's paperwork force a court to say the quiet part out loud? Or does the machine simply wait until the man inside it stops breathing? October 27, 2003. Judge Lynn Hughes issues a 29-page opinion in United States versus Wilson. It reads, less like procedure and more like a moral alarm. He does not say the evidence is messy. He says the government knowingly used false evidence and suppressed favorable evidence. He orders the conviction vacated. In 29 pages, a federal judge dismantles the credibility of the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth. He writes memorably that America will not defeat terrorism by double-crossing a part-time, informal government agent. Then he refuses to let the blame hide inside a single prosecutor's ignorance. He calls out the institutional rot directly, identifying roughly 24 government lawyers who participated in creating the false story, hiding contradictory material, and refusing to correct it across 2 decades. This is Wilson's victory. The obscene promise he made himself in solitary, fulfilled. The typewriter beats the affidavit. The Justice Department declines to appeal, declines to retry. The case that branded him a traitor collapses under the weight of its own paperwork. But victory does not rewind time. Wilson still carries other convictions. The system never fully returns his life. It only admits one part of the machine was cheated. September 14th, 2004. Edwin Wilson walks out of federal prison after roughly 22 years inside. He is 76. He does not walk out to an empire. The acreage is gone. The portfolio is gone. The family ties are damaged beyond repair. The man who once knew Concorde flight attendants by name now lives near Seattle on a monthly Social Security check reported at $1,080. He is not just older. He is stripped to essentials, breathing, paperwork, and a stubborn need to be more than the label they pinned on him. So he tries to make them pay. He files a civil lawsuit against the people he says framed him, federal prosecutors, Justice Department officials, and Briggs himself. Some of the men he names have since become federal judges. In March 2007, U.S. District Judge Lee Rosenthal dismissed the suit, not because she finds the conduct noble, because the law shields it. Absolute prosecutorial immunity. In plain English, even if officials did something improper while acting as prosecutors, they cannot be sued for it. On appeal, the Fifth Circuit affirms. The defendants are immune for conduct related to the prosecutions and related proceedings. That is the system's final trick. It can admit it lied and still ensure no one pays, not a dollar in damages, not a single career derailed. The 24 lawyers Judge Hughes named go on with their lives. Some retire with pensions, some sit on the bench. The man they helped bury collects Social Security. Wilson keeps working after the dismissal, organizing documents, filing appeals on remaining convictions, drinking black coffee, still reconstructing a life from paper. He tells reporters he feels no guilt, that he did not hurt anyone, that he did not get anyone killed. Even David Korn, Ted Shackley's biographer, offers the line that captures the whole grim paradox. They framed a guilty man. Then time finishes what prisons start. September 10th, 2012. Wilson died in Seattle at 84 from complications following heart valve replacement surgery. 22 years in prison, 8 years of freedom, 76 years of being someone the government could use and then deny. His nephew says the biggest part of his vindication is simple. The traitor label is finally off. A man trained to live in secret, erased by secrets, then forced to spend 22 years proving that the secret was a lie. He wins the battle. The system wins the war, and it leaves behind a question like a loaded weapon on a table. If the rules can be bent far enough to destroy one of their own, a man who knew the names, held the files, and hosted the generals. If you found Wilson's story shocking, wait until you see El Mayo Zambada, the Sinaloa co-founder who stayed free for 50 years and ended up in U.S. custody, not caught, but delivered. This video shows the betrayal by his godson, the setup that bypassed decades of paranoia, and the fallout in Sinaloa and between Mexico and the U.S.